In the ashes of the Second World War, the map of Asia was being redrawn. Old empires crumbled, and new nations began to rise. Yet in Indochina, the past refused to fade away so quietly. When Japan surrendered in 1945, its occupation of Vietnam ended abruptly, leaving a power vacuum. Into that vacuum stepped two opposing forces, the returning French colonial administration and the Vietnamese nationalists of the Viet Minh, led by a thin, quiet revolutionary named Ho Chi Minh. Ho was more than a nationalist. He was a student of global revolution, shaped by decades abroad, from Paris to Moscow, from Boston to Beijing. He believed Vietnam's independence was inevitable, but that freedom would come only through struggle. The French, however, saw Indochina not as a relic of empire, but as a vital part of France's identity. After the humiliation of Nazi occupation, Paris sought to reassert its global influence. To many French leaders, losing Vietnam would mean losing face on the world stage. In late 1945, negotiations began between France and the Viet Minh. Ho Chi Minh, pragmatic but wary, signed an agreement recognizing Vietnam as a free state within the French Union. It was a fragile peace, one built on mistrust. Beneath the signatures, both sides prepared for the conflict they knew was coming. By December 1946, tensions reached a breaking point in Hanoi. A dispute over customs inspection spiraled into gunfire. The French responded with heavy artillery, shelling Vietnamese neighborhoods. Streets burned, civilians fled, and the city descended into chaos. The First Indochina War had begun. For the next 8 years, the French Expeditionary Corps, roughly 190,000 men at its height, fought against the guerrillas of the Viet Minh, who numbered nearly 500,000 by the war's end. But the two sides were not fighting the same kind of war. France fought conventionally, with tanks, artillery, and aircraft, trying to hold cities, roads, and outposts. The Viet Minh fought from the shadows, ambushing convoys, sabotaging supply lines, and melting into the jungle. To the French, they were elusive and everywhere at once. The war spread across the countryside. French patrols moved cautiously through rice paddies and dense forests, uncertain when the next mine or ambush would come. Villages became battlegrounds. The line between soldier and civilian blurred, as the Viet Minh relied heavily on local support. In remote areas, the Viet Minh built hidden bases, underground hospitals, schools, and training camps, connected by footpaths and tunnels. They fought not just with rifles, but with conviction, a belief that they were liberating their homeland from foreign rule. The French called it La Salgue, the Dirty War. For young conscripts from Paris and Marseille, it was a distant, confusing conflict fought in unbearable heat and constant fear. Morale was low, supplies stretched thin, and the enemy rarely stood still long enough to fight. Meanwhile, the world outside Vietnam was changing. The Cold War was taking shape. In 1949, Mao Zedong's communist forces triumphed in China, giving the Viet Minh a powerful new ally and a direct supply route for weapons and training. In the same year, the United States recognized the French-backed state of Vietnam under Emperor Bao Dai, marking the first steps of American involvement. From then on, Vietnam was no longer just a colonial struggle, it was part of the global contest between East and West. The French received American funding and arms, while the Viet Minh received support from China and the Soviet Union. The conflict became a test of wills between ideologies as much as armies. By 1952, the war had reached a stalemate. French commanders controlled the major cities, Hanoi, Saigon, and Haiphong, but the countryside belonged to the Viet Minh. For every village pacified, another rose in rebellion. French outposts became isolated islands of control in a sea of insurgency. In Paris, public opinion began to shift. The cost of the war was rising, tens of thousands of casualties, billions of francs spent, and little progress made. Many questioned whether Indochina was worth the price. But for Ho Chi Minh and his general, Vo Nguyen Giap, the strategy was clear: endure, outlast, and bleed the French until their will to fight collapsed. Giap, a former history teacher turned military mastermind, believed time itself was Vietnam's greatest weapon. "You can kill 10 of our men," he said, "for every one we kill of yours, but even at those odds, you will lose and we will win." As the war dragged on, both sides committed acts that would scar the nation for generations. Villages suspected of aiding the Viet Minh were burned, prisoners were executed, and propaganda turned neighbors against one another. It was a war of attrition, physical and psychological. By 1953, the French sought a decisive blow to end the conflict. They turned their eyes to a remote valley in northwestern Vietnam, near the Laotian border, a place called Dien Bien Phu. There, they believed, they could lure Giap's army into open battle and crush it once and for all. It was a gamble born of frustration, and it would change the fate of Vietnam forever. After nearly 8 years of war, neither side had achieved total victory. But the French Empire, battered and weary, was beginning to lose its grip. The final act of the First Indochina War was about to begin, and with it, the foundations of the Vietnam War itself were being laid. Next, with the thunder of guns in a remote valley, and the moment the balance of power in Southeast Asia shifted forever.